Primetime local news, serving the Lakeland and Midwest regions.
There are 5 new cases of COVID-19 in Saskatchewan. 1 is in Saskatoon, 3 in Regina, and 1 in the South Central Zone. 165 are considered active. 13 people are in hospital, 5 of those are in intensive care. 1,265 people have recovered. Last week, the government of Saskatchewan released the Safe School Plan, setting out the health guidelines that will be in place at Saskatchewan schools. Tonight, we will take a look at what LPSD students can expect as they return to school classes in September.
When kids return to the classroom this fall, things will be different. Frequent sanitation of high-touch areas is a pillar of the LPSD Reopen Plan. The district will not be allowing evening use of their facilities and have moved evening janitorial staff to the daytime.
We already had full-time daytime caretakers, and then in addition to that, we've also added 160 hours of caretaking per week in our schools. So there will be a significant increase in sanitation expectations.
Water fountains, microwaves, and other high-touch items will be off limits to students.
There are things we feel we have to do in order to keep schools safe. Microwave use is something that will not be available to students in LPSD. It's a common high-touch surface. It's something that there's ways to work around, and so they will be removed from schools. Water fountains, we're not having water fountain usage, but we have water bottle fill stations in all of our schools. So we're just asking parents to provide their children with a water bottle so that kids can have access to water throughout the course of the day. That also mitigates kids asking to leave the room when we're trying to keep kids cohorted into smaller groups.
Gym classes will continue with strict sanitation practices in place, and extracurricular activities are off the table, at least for now.
There will be some precautions around minimizing shared equipment. Obviously, right now in our schools anyway, when kids enter a room, a classroom, they will hand sanitize. So when kids come into a gym, they will be coming in with clean hands. So they can use a basketball, they can do those things. But at the end of the class, whatever equipment was used will have to be sanitized.
While masks are not mandatory for schools in Saskatchewan right now, LPSD will be getting masks from the Alberta government and will be prepared if masks become mandated for Saskatchewan schools.
So our original plan talks about mask usage in situations where children might present some symptoms of being ill or you're working in very close contact with kids. As you mentioned, Alberta announced last week that they were going to provide masks to school divisions to have mask mandatory for staff and students grades 4 to 12. We learned late last week that Lloyd Public was a part of that announcement. Although we're legislated by Saskatchewan, we will be given masks by Alberta.
Under the Safe Schools Plan, there are 4 levels. Right now, we're at level 1, with near normal return to school. But if the need arises and schools reach level 4, LPSD would be prepared to quickly move to remote learning.
You have to be ready to flip the switch on a day to move to sharing your content remotely. So we've identified platforms and different processes so that can happen. So we're absolutely prepared for that.
Procedures for things like fire drills are still being worked out on a school-by-school basis. Next week, the district will unveil a plan for parents who are wanting to school their children from home. Jace Mackey, Primetime Local News.
It's time now for this week's retrospect. Here's Blake Nath.
This week in retrospect. In the summer of '95, tourists flocked to Lloydminster to see the sights.
Summer months, the time of year when tourists load up their trailers and head out on holidays. And from the license plate seen throughout the border city, people from across the continent are visiting Lloydminster.
This is my first time in Saskatchewan, and I've always heard that it's very flat and there's nothing to see, and I think that's totally wrong. There's lots to see and there's lots to do. And I'm going to definitely have to come back here someday when I've got more time on my hands and spend more time here.
I would say the reception center was probably the most useful one I've been in, and we've been in 3 of them so far, so that was good.
Which one useful about it as opposed to
just pleasant people and helpful, and gave us the information we needed.
Last year, 26,000 people experienced the friendly reception border city tourism booths had to offer. And this year, the numbers are even more encouraging.
And in 2000, the circus comes to town, bringing with it stunning performances and exotic animals.
It started almost 40 years ago as a group of performers visiting armed force bases, and now the Gatti Circus travels around North America, entertaining thousands.
More than anything, I would call it a lifestyle.
And a lifestyle it is. The 100 members of the circus eat, sleep, and breathe together for 9 months out of the year.
Family for 9 months, we're like a small city within a city, if you will. A lot of us get close, a lot of us get, apart. You can't help that.
You can sure see the closeness as these performers rely on each other for the perfect execution of their tricks. But the circus does not only offer stunts. Like any other big top, animals are an intricate part of the show and the intermission.
And that's it for this week in retrospect.
Retrospect this week is brought to you by Webb's Ford. Worth your while to drive the extra mile. Webb's Ford in Vermilion.
We'll have more primetime local news after the break.
Furniture set and design supplied by Furniture Gallery and Furniture House, downtown Lloydminster.
Welcome back. With the school year coming up in the fall, people are looking for ways to get active after their summer vacations. We spoke with Renee Wankoff from World Class Training and Nutrition about getting back into physical education, especially while being in quarantine. Thank you for joining us today, Renee. With summer coming to an end and people being in quarantine, what are some suggestions for residents wanting to get back into shape?
Well, obviously the cool thing is all of our gyms are all open again. So, I mean, that's one cool thing. But in reality, just getting out with the family, it's not so much of, doing exercises and lifting weights or playing a sport, even just going for a walk with the family, getting out and hanging out. That's all you got to do is just get out of the house and go do something active instead of staying home and sitting on your butt like we have been for so long.
And now, especially for children, do you believe this virus has affected negatively on physical education for people?
Definitely. I mean, to me, it's declining the amount of children that have been coming to the gym. A lot of parents are still scared of it. I mean, in all honesty, this gym is still packed with children. We have a lot of children we train here, but there's a lot of the parents that have said, until this is under control, we're going to hold our kid back from the gym. It's understandable, but it all depends on what side of the fence you believe on. So I understand.
Yeah, and for residents struggling mentally to find motivation during quarantine for exercise, how do you believe that they can get back into that mindset?
In all honesty, it's almost the same thing because like we've been traumatized by staying at home and, in all honesty, drinking and smoking and eating so dang much compared to what we used to, that the smallest step's going to make a difference. Like I said, just getting off the couch and going for a walk with a friend, anything like that, and cutting back the little things, cutting back the amount of food we've been taking in and the amount of phone time and computer time and sitting on the couch time. It's just been so crazy and so overwhelming that we're used to doing nothing, that the smallest little increment of change just to get out and go for a walk is already a big step.
And can you kind of expand on, like, for training, what types of exercises can help people easily do at home during this quarantine?
Right. I mean, my favorite little workouts, I mean, everybody can do them. It's pretty basic. I always get them to do, you'd say 10 squats, 10 body squats, 10 push-ups, 10 sit-ups. Do that, take a little break, take 2 minutes, do it again. Try to do that 5 times. If you can do that 5 times, do that for a week, every day. Next week, try to do it 6 times. The week after, try to do it 7. I mean, you don't need a whole gym to get back from where we are. So like I said, 10 push-ups, 10 squats, 10 sit-ups, take a break for a couple of minutes and try to do that, as many times as you can, and then try to beat it the next week.
And what are some ways for people to keep eating or eat nutritionally while being in quarantine?
Well, I mean, in all honesty, everybody knows that I think the worst thing about the quarantine was we're all scared to leave our house. So everybody was doing skip the dishes like crazy, right? Like that was probably their most successful few months in the world because nobody wanted to leave their house. They're all scared. So, I mean, just hitting back to the grocery store and hitting up the, the fruits and vegetables and meat aisles is going to be a massive change right there because we're letting everybody else do the cooking because we're scared to go outside.
And how come you believe staying active is important for children and adults?
Well, mentally. For me, I think being active is 100% mental. As soon as you start, moving, your brain starts sparking. You start getting those releases of happiness in your brain. The longer you sit down, you lose all that. Everything kind of calms down. But then as soon as you start being active again and getting out of the house and making your own decisions, everything lights up and you're happier and you're a better person.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Renee.
Anytime.
With the NHL playoffs about to start, our Connor Chan and Eric Bay break down the matchups in both conferences.
Well, joining us once again is Eric Bay for the Weekly Sports Panel. Eric, it's been a big couple of days here in the NHL playoffs. Of course, we now know who the teams are going to be in the playoffs for the official start of it. Let's start with the Tampa Bay Columbus series. It's a rematch of last year. A lot of people were surprised that Toronto didn't score the last game there, but let's just talk about that Tampa Bay Columbus series. It should be a very, very feisty rematch there.
Yeah, obviously going to be a very interesting matchup here, as you mentioned. A big rematch coming up, and it's going to be pretty interesting just the fact that Toronto and Tampa Bay are kind of similar teams, and maybe they're a little more offensively focused. So I really think the Blue Jackets will match up well again. Just looking how they played the Maple Leafs in this last series, the Maple Leafs put all their big guns on that one line. So maybe not the same depth that Tampa does have, but it should be pretty interesting. I think Columbus will be able to keep the scoring low. It'll be up to their goalies, Jonas Korpisalo and Elvis Merzlikins, to keep that one close. However, I think Tampa is going to be a little bit hungrier than they were maybe last year when they did get swept. So I think this one will be pretty evenly matched. However, I do think Tampa has a good shot to move on to the next round.
And one thing, too, at Tampa Bay, they don't have Steven Stamkos or Victor Hedman right now, so that'll definitely be a major factor there. Another interesting matchup there, it's the top-seeded Philadelphia Flyers against the bottom-seeded Montreal Canadiens, a series where Montreal did not expect to go past the qualifying round against Sidney Crosby and the Penguins, but with this Montreal, they've gotten contributions from everybody, especially down the middle with their center depth being so good.
Yeah, I would say that for sure, and also just their goaltending. Obviously, Carey Price has not maybe played to the level of the Carey Price we know from years past, these last couple years, but he really showed up this last series. And again, this is the thing with bubble hockey, is really anybody can get hot, and we really have no idea how it's going to look for any team going into any series, even from day to day. The one thing I will say, though, about the Philadelphia Flyers, they were maybe the hottest team in the league when the NHL season was suspended. They had just finished a 9-game win streak about that time and also have kept rolling here throughout the playoffs. They have some of those younger guys, the Travis Konechny's, also Kevin Hayes as well, are kind of starting to lead that team. So I really feel like Philly has a good shot here to run the table. But again, a very tough and interesting matchup when all the pressure's on you as the number 1 seed, and Montreal, has a chance to continue to go far if they get some solid goaltending.
Yeah, it'll be a goaltending battle for sure, as Carter Hart has played very, very well for the Flyers. Another one here, it's former coach going against former team here, the Washington Capitals against the New York Islanders in the series there. And there's lots of similarities between these two teams as well, both pretty well balanced there, Eric. I know goaltending, they're matched up there. Where do you see that one going?
It's tough. I think all of these series are really tough to kind of predict at this point. However, I do like the Islanders just based on their overall scheme. Again, we've still seen here in the playoffs, just looking at that Maple Leafs Blue Jacket series, defense wins championships is what I like to go by, and I think that the Islanders structure will really help them moving forward. However, again, you can't ignore Washington and what they have up front. The one question mark, I guess you could say, or maybe concern, is Braden Holtby. Again, another goalie who we've seen maybe not at his best in the last couple of years. So if he can steal a few games or even just give them some pretty solid goaltending, I think the Capitals will be in a good shape. But again, hard to ignore the Islanders with their coaching and their structure overall.
And lastly, it's the Boston Bruins taking on the Carolina Hurricanes. Boston has not played pretty well in the round robin, but the Carolina Hurricanes played really well in the qualifiers against the Rangers, where everyone kind of wrote out the Hurricanes. They have a really good offensive group there, led by Aho and Svechnikov, and also a great blue line led there by Slavin. And Peter Mrazek has been really, really good. Will he be considered maybe an X factor in that series if they are going to take down Boston?
Oh, definitely, for sure. I think goaltending really, either way you go, because they did play James Reimer for one game too. I think goaltending is going to be big for Carolina to go far, because as these goals get tougher, you're going to need your goalie to bail you out. And again, you mentioned Svechnikov and Aho were lights out in the qualifying round. So it's going to be as far as those guys could take them, with some help from the goaltending side of things as well. And I think they are ripe to go far. Just the fact that you mentioned the Bruins not playing their best hockey and really at a disadvantage with this season stoppage. They were 10 points above anybody else in the league and now slipped to fourth, didn't win a game in that round robin. So I think Boston is going to be in some pretty big trouble here. I don't know if it's just the fact that Tuukka Rask was unable to play for a few games, or just some of the old guys having some trouble getting their wheels under them. But this is trouble for Boston, I think, and we could definitely see Carolina with their players, and then Rod Brind'Amour as well has proven to be a very solid coach. I think they could go far as well, maybe conference finals or further.
We did talk about the Eastern Conference matchups. Now we're talking about the Western Conference. Let's start with Dallas and Calgary, Eric. I know Calgary was really, really good against the Winnipeg Jets. Of course, mind you, the Jets did lose some players to injury, but now with Dallas, they're also losing some key guys as they're deemed unfit to play. Calgary seems like they have the upper hand against Dallas at this point.
Yeah, again, I think Calgary was obviously very fortunate, as they were the highest remaining seed too, as the 8th seed coming out of that qualifying round, so they'll be playing the 4th seed there. And I think also what will help them too is, you mentioned they did look pretty good against what was a depleted Jets lineup, to be fair. However, I think that playing those hard-fought games also saw a lot of that playoff atmosphere in all 4 of those games. So I think that will help them going in to a team that kind of struggled and is also 1-7-2 if you count their games before the NHL season was shut down, which, I mean, obviously doesn't matter at this point, but it's kind of something to look at as they continue to slide here in that qualifying round, or the round robin, excuse me. So I do think Calgary's in good shape. It depends, though. Again, as always, their top scorers are kind of spotty in the playoffs. So Johnny Gaudreau, Sean Monahan, those guys will need to continue to put up points like they did in that qualifying round.
Well, Gaudreau finally got on the board, as opposed to the last playoffs where he didn't really do much against the Colorado Avalanche. Now, speaking of the Colorado Avalanche, they're going to take on the Arizona Coyotes, a team that has a really good lineup there in Colorado, Eric. But Darcy Kemper really stole the show there against the Nashville Predators in that round robin, where a lot of people did kind of write out the Coyotes in that regard there as a lower seeded team. So what's Arizona going to have to do if they are going to take down the Avalanche?
They're going to need to score more. This is a lineup that doesn't really produce a ton of offense. And Darcy Kemper, you're right, he was lights out, excuse me. But again, it was against kind of a depleted Nashville lineup, and just the fact that their top guys haven't really performed at all throughout the entire season, and it continued to stay that way in the qualifying round. And they're going to be facing a much better, much hungrier Colorado Avalanche offense. So I think Kemper's going to have to steal the show a little bit, but he can't do it all by himself. So you're going to need guys like Taylor Hall, Phil Kessel, those guys to step up, score some big goals at key times, because you can't win all those games, I don't think, 1-0, 2-1 against an offense like the Colorado Avalanche.
Yeah, they're going to definitely have to get some help from all areas, especially on their blue line as well. Now, the Vegas-Chicago matchup, no one kind of thought this would happen. Everyone also wrote out the Blackhawks early on against the Edmonton Oilers, but of course we did see the Blackhawks storm through the Oilers and Connor McDavid and their whole blue line as well in Edmonton. But Vegas has a much different blue line than the Edmonton Oilers do, as well as goaltending. Will be interesting to see who gets the start between the Blackhawks there. So just talk about the Vegas-Chicago matchup and what Vegas will have to do to shut down the Kane and Taves pair there.
Yeah, I mean, I think Vegas is much deeper team all around than Edmonton. Obviously, Edmonton kind of falls off, but really you're going to have to shut down those big forwards. Taves was a beast against the Oilers, as well as Kirby Dach, kind of a surprise and a very pleasant one for the Blackhawks. But I think you really have to shut down those top 2 guys and just get a ton of shots, because as well as Corey Crawford did play, he again has maybe some injury concerns, also just some spotty play recently as well. So I think really the Vegas Golden Knights just have to play their game and not get too in their head about the pressure of being that #1 seed, which maybe might have happened as well with Edmonton as the top seed in that qualifying round. So I think really Vegas just needs to stick to their game and trust what they have, including their goaltender, Marc-Andre Fleury. He's been a big playoff performer recently. So as long as they can kind of keep steady as they've been going here in the past, I think they'll be all right. But you can't count out those old guys. Obviously, a ton of experience, Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews. So it should be a pretty fun series to watch.
Yeah, that Chicago defense was definitely the story in that Edmonton series. And lastly, Eric, the St. Louis Blues against the Vancouver Canucks. Now, one thing, of course, the Blues are big, they're physical, and then the Vancouver Canucks, the kind of opposite. They're still big, but they have a lot of speed and skill. And you look at a team that forechecks really hard, like the Blues, and going up against smaller defensemen like Quinn Hughes. How are the Canucks going to manage the physicality there against St. Louis?
They're going to have to move the puck, really, is kind of the end of story. You mentioned fast and skilled, and those guys are going to need the puck on their sticks. We're talking the Brock Bessers, the Elias Petterssons. Those guys need the puck. They need to be moving it quick and try to keep it out of their zone as much as possible. They gave up a ton of shots in the regular season, and Jacob Markstrom, again, ton of shots he saw in the qualifying round, and also maybe wasn't as solid as he was in that regular season. So he's going to have to continue to make big saves like he did earlier on. But again, just keep that puck out of your zone and try to keep your defenseman from getting hit, because you mentioned St. Louis, big, strong guys, but maybe a half a step slower. So if Vancouver can move those pucks, they'll be okay. But it, again, should be a pretty tough series, and two different philosophies kind of going at it. So we'll see which one wins out there.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great playoffs nonetheless. Eric, thanks a lot for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.